Hello and welcome to another painting video. No matter how many stuff I paint, I always like to come back to Nurgle models and go all out with the grossness. I've had this model for Festus many years now and I totally forgot about him. One of the few Maggotkin models I didn't have painted yet. This is an amazing model with lots of macabre details, and I try to go all out with the sickly skin and gore. Let's begin, shall we? As a test, I'm going to spray an over and under spray in different colors, hoping this will help the painting process. I first spray the entire model black, and I do an overspray with Dorn Yellow. Next, I do an underspray with Naggaroth Night. This way we get two contrasting colors working as highlights and shadows. Not sure if this will show through in the end results, but let's see. Somehow this color combination reminds me of the Milka chocolate bars. I think the model will look a lot more interesting with purple shading than just black. Now let's continue with the largest area of this model, Festus Skin. I first paint the skin using Guilliman Flesh. In order to keep the base layers visible, I watered down the contrast paint just a little bit. On certain areas of the model, I add Plaguebearer Flesh. This yellow-green paint is great as a base for gangrene on sickly skin. Little tip, never Google gangrene on Google Images. I then add a watered-down voluptuous pink to other parts of the skin, especially deep folds and open sores. I also paint the big tentacles he has growing out of his sides. I then layer a mix of Kislev Flesh and Plaguebearer Flesh on the skin. I want to keep him away from Caucasian flesh tones and mixed in some Plaguebearer Flesh to keep the skin gross. I repeat the previous step, but with a mix of Flayed One Flesh and Plaguebearer Flesh. I keep to the raised areas that are hit by light. I end with a highlight of pure Flayed One Flesh on the most prominent parts. The areas that are gangrenous I layer with a mix of Dorn Yellow and Plaguebearer Flesh. The tentacles are highlighted with a mix of Fulgrim Pink and Plaguebearer Flesh again. I mix this to keep the colors a little bit more disgusting. And I end with a highlight of Pallid Flesh mixed with, you guessed it, Plaguebearer Flesh. This is an effective way of painting some sickly looking skin. There will be some added details later on when I tackle all the gore on the model. But first, let's have a look at his wooden contraption on his back. I start the rotting wood with Dryad Bark. Because of the very deep grooves in this model, I water down the paint so I can get in all the nooks and crannies. I then layer on Steel Legion Drab. Because of this model, this is more of a dry brush, but for any other model, just layer it on. I stipple on Ushabti Bone. This acts as a highlight, but I'm also adding some texture to the wood. I shade the wood with Agrax Earthshade. This dirties up the wood, but also dulls down the colors quite a bit. That's why I stipple back some Ushabti Bone on all the parts where the light would hit the wood. To get some color variation on the wood, I shade it with Seraphim Sepia. This already looks like some wood gone bad, but if we add Biel-Tan Green to some parts of the wood, it will get a mossy texture that will enhance the decay. I painted all the wood, including the staff. The wood really fits well with the already painted sickly skin. One of the fun details on this model is the fat little Nurgling who's shoving a leg into the already stuffed contraption. Let's paint him next. I first painted the Nurgling with Athonian Camoshade. This is a really nice dirty green. I want the Nurgling to pop a little bit more, so I also paint him with Plaguebearer Flesh. This enhances the previous layer a lot. I layer on a mix of Plaguebearer Flesh and Dorn Yellow. Because of the established over and under spray, it is very easy to see where to place the highlights. I also add Dorn Yellow to further highlight the Nurgling. His huge eye I paint with Blood Angel's Red for a nice bright red demon eye. I highlight the eye with Wild Rider Red and add a dot of Dorn Yellow for the light reflection. I thought the Nurgling looked a little bit too boring, so I added some Guilliman Flesh on certain parts to add some variety to the skin. Let's quickly tackle some small details. First, I paint all the skulls and paper scrolls with Skeleton Horde. And dry brush them with Screaming Skull. All the maggots on this model are painted with Pallid Flesh and shaded with Athonian Camoshade. Some small trinkets on his staff I paint with Targor Rage Shade. And some with Berserker Bloodshade to add a little bit of variety. The mushrooms at the bottom are painted with Coelia Greenshade. All the metal is painted with a watered down Iron Warriors. And shaded with Agrax Earthshade to make it nice and dirty. I really like the liquid rust pigment of Greenstuff world, so I'm using that here to add rust to the metal. I end with a highlight of Runefang Steel to bring back some of the metal. These small details are usually not the effort to put a lot of time into them, unless you're painting for a competition. On the tabletop, these small details will not be very visible at all. I don't think we really want to know what is in that nasty vial, but we have to paint it. I paint it with a watered down blue horror. And then I paint the contents of the vial with Akhelian Green. I added a curve on the big vial with the previous layer so I can add another side view of the liquid with a mix of Akhelian Green and blue horror. I paint the edge of the vials with a white scar and add dots of light reflection. On to the fun stuff. First, I paint all the corpses and gore with a very watered down Rakarth Flesh. I then shade the corpses and gore with Druchii Violet. All the guts and gore I paint again with Volupus Pink to make it a nice pink fleshy color. I layer on a mix of Rakarth Flesh and Pallid Flesh on all the corpses and limbs. Make sure the purple undercoat is still showing in the recesses. I then highlight the same parts with Pallid Flesh, creating a very pale looking dead flesh. With the old glaze Lamenters Yellow, I add some discolored patches on the corpses. I also add this to all the boils on Festus and his tentacles. All the guts and gore get a highlight of Emperor's Children. I further highlighted with a mix of Emperor's Children and Fulgrim Pink. There's a third highlight of Fulgrim Pink. And I end with a highlight of Fulgrim Pink mixed with White Scar. Next, I take an old brush and I add a watered down Blood for the Blood God to all the gore and corpses. Just go nuts here and add as much or as little as you want. Just make sure the paint is very watered down so the original paint job is still showing through. The deepest recesses I shade with Nuln Oil to create some depth in the gore. I also add Nurgles Rot to the gore and to Festus on certain areas. This really helps to sell the grossness of the model. And finally, I add some Ardcoat, which is a gloss varnish to all the gore. The blood is already pretty glossy, but I didn't think that was quite enough. Because of all the sickly muted colors on the model, the gore really pops. It's really fun to paint this, and I wish more models had some visible gore instead of just Nurgle. Anyways, let's finish this model with the base. I put Festus on a big piece of cork made to resemble a piece of rock. I paint this with a very watered down Rhinox Hide. I shade with Nuln Oil and dry brush the base with Screaming Skull. Then I add patches of Nurgles Rot to this model so it will fit with the rest of my Maggotkin army. At the back I add some Blood for the Blood God because I'm sure all those guts are dripping like crazy. I end with painting the rim of the base with Steel Legion drab, and we're done. And here we have Festus the Leechlord, ready to perform his ghastly experiments on hapless victims. Finally, after all these years, he's painted instead of in a box somewhere. I have very few Finecast models. I wonder if they're still being sold, but I didn't really have any problems with this one. I'm currently making some plans in order to build a brand new Warhammer 40k army, so more on that soon. In the meantime, be sure to check out my Instagram, where I post pictures of current projects and behind the scenes stuff. But for now, thanks for watching.